obviously surfing is kind of a niche that, like, we know how it is. Surfers don't like other people coming in.
Yeah.
But then you start learning how surfing community is. You're like, oh, this sucks. You know, like, not everybody, but I'm just like media wise.
Yeah.
But one thing that you did that really was cool, you like invited the media to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like you took it head on. I'm like,
yeah. I had no problem with that. I had no problem. You know, I think there was more people inside the organization that had an issue with that. I think one of my great mentors and, friend and somebody I admire and look up to is Dana White.
Yes.
I was so privileged to get to meet and spend time with Dana.
Yeah.
And when I first met Dana for the first time, it was with my friend Craig Pelagian, who sold me the Welcome to Sweetie Pie show.
Yeah.
And Dana flew to Surf Ranch.
Yeah.
And
I met him that day. Well, I've met him before many times.
Yeah, but that day we were there with Craig.
Yeah, I was there.
Because he wanted to see the wave because we had this idea of doing the spinoff of The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
Because Craig did Tough with Dana. And so that just started a very organic cadence, thing with Dana where I would text him back. And then when we were out selling the show, we were in town spending a lot of time together. And, it was right about the time that I had just become CEO and I was confiding in Dana that, I think that, if you were looking at this, what would you advise? Because this is a guy who put the UFC on his back and made it what it did. No one believed it. No one believed him, right? Yeah. And, I'll never forget, I won't share everything he told me, but he was just like, somebody has to be the face of the league.
Yes.
Somebody has to stand up and be the face of the league because you're going to get hammered and you need to, whether it's you or somebody. And Dana's point was like, that's what he had to do for the UFC.
Yes.
And what it does and did for the UFC was it gives the UFC a direction.
Yes.
And right, wrong, or indifferent, the fighters, the fans, the media, they know who to blame.
Yeah.
There's no question if there's a problem with the UFC, who you're calling.
Yeah.
Right? And so Dana was like, that's what you need to do with the WSL. And so it was that insight that he gave me, which is why I would do that. I would lean into it and I'd always be the one that would go out there. And, I paid the price for it.
Right.
Often.
Yeah. I've always appreciated that because before that I worked for the UFC and I met Dana. And this is when UFC was smaller.
Right.
They weren't even where they are now, where it was a smaller building by Sahara.
Yeah.
It was just two small buildings and everybody knew each other. And we would have meetings at Dana's office all the time.
Yeah.
I trained jiu-jitsu with his bodyguard. We were all,
Yeah.
And I remember when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, we're in a good path.
Yeah.
Like Dana was so good about these things. He was so unapologetic. He still is. He still is. Yeah. I remember when Instagram Live started and they wanted to put, Dana was doing Instagram Live.
Yeah.
And then I was watching it and then somebody on the comment said, man, I hate UFC, Yeah. And he's like, George, hates UFC? Fuck you, don't watch it then. That's like,
I know.
This is a CEO.
That's Dana.
That's when you, as a fan, because we're smart. Fans are, you can only fool fans for a little bit.
Yeah.
That's when me as a fan, I'm like, he doesn't answer to nobody.
No. Yeah.
And
well, I think he's
also lucky that he was friends with the Fertittas.
The Fertittas, but it's also too. It's a little bit of like that who he is as a human is very much what the UFC is as a sport. I think the difference from that surfing analogy, it's like, look, I mean, it's. I think that there should be a face. I think that there needs to be like a direction. I think the fans, the industry, should have that.
Yeah.
I can't think of a sport out there that you don't know who runs it.
Right.
Whether it's Roger Goodell, Adam Silver, whoever.
Yeah.
I think that's important. That may not be the view that a lot of people have. And I think if you are going to be that person, you are going to have to put yourself out there completely unfiltered and in a way that kind of goes out there. Was that right or wrong? Who knows? I don't know. I mean, if I had to do it all over again, would I do it that way? I absolutely would.
Yeah, I like that way too, because I mean, like I said, a lot of my years there, obviously, you know, most of my best friends are from there. I love everybody there. They're all great. But most of the years there, when you were there, like the chunk that you were there, it felt like we were all kind of like, you know, doing our drums and going in the same direction and doing something relevant. And I felt good about it. I really felt good about it. And I obviously changed jobs and whatever it was, but it needs that, you know. I
think so.
Let's all do it together.
Well, I think all companies need to have a cultural sort of North Star or a leader that's sort of driving to where it is. And I see that with what I do now in a lot of organizations. They sort of like kind of operate a bit like a ship without a rudder.
Right.
They're just sort of drifting based upon the winds and the tide, and
very reactive,
or not reactive and just accepting of whatever will happen. And I think what I always encourage people, it's like, look, you've got to have, go back to that word, intention. You got to have an intention of what you want to do. You know, I think whether or not I was, you know, what I was doing at the WSL, whether or not it was OWN or anything else, I think I've always been fairly intentional about what I was trying to accomplish. And, you know, the shows that we did on Apple, intention. Shows that we did on ABC, intention.
Right.
All of the things that we put forth for the sport was all done from a place of intention. You know, the historians will write whether it was good, wrong, or indifferent. I don't really care. Doesn't matter. But I've taken all those lessons and try to impart those into the businesses and the businesses we have now about, hey, you know, intentionality matters.
Yes.
Intentionality matters.